Hi, everyone. We have a large audience today. We just ask that you bear with us a few more moments while more register and sign in. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. This is our second event in the series of 2020 Finlocity Online Summits. We have an outstanding group of seasoned financial services and technology professionals with us who are going to share personal experiences and insights within the world of FinServ FinTech operations. We trust that you'll find their perspectives both informative and entertaining. Before we get started, I'd like to thank all of our sponsors: Red Oak Compliance Solutions, SmartX Advisory Solutions, AdvisorPeak, Invent.us, and AdvisorStream, who have helped make this event possible. I encourage everyone to take a look at the work they do for financial practitioners. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. Finlocity sent out an attendee guide to all registered attendees. The attendee guide outlines the agenda, information about today's speakers and panelists, and a directory to help connect with each other. If you didn't receive it, please contact us by email at contact@finlocity.com, and we'll gladly get that email over to you. As always, we want the online summit to be interactive, so please feel free to ask the speaker questions throughout the event by typing into the Q&A box on the control panel. Your questions will be answered during the Q&A session at the end of each presentation. Now I'd like to introduce today's first presentation, entitled Leveraging Technology to Streamline Compliance. For this session, we're joined by Stephen Pope. Mr. Pope has over 27 years of experience in developing mission-critical software applications for the financial services industry. Prior to co-founding Red Oak over 10 years ago, Stephen served as Director of Application Engineering at NFP Securities, where he led a team of developers to create custom software for the broker-dealer and RA divisions. He was also the Managing Director of Operations at Proficient, a public company with 220 consultants. And as an entrepreneur at heart, he's also owned several successful startups and has vast experience in project management and client relationship building. So without further ado, I give you Stephen Pope on leveraging technology to streamline compliance.
Hey, morning, everyone. Thank you for attending, taking time from your busy calendars. If talking to folks is any indication, we think a lot of people are really busy despite working from home. During today's session, I'm going to share with you a number of ideas. My goal is that you have some takeaways at the end of it that you find useful, you can apply in your own business. I know a lot of folks have been forced to look at their technology with this COVID-19 and the vast amount of people that are working from home, a lot of Zoom meetings and so on. I'm going to spend some time trying to balance generic or general recommendations on technology in the compliance space, intermixed with some of what we do, which is advertising review technology, only because I think a lot of it is also applicable across the board. The scope of what we do is advertising review technology. But when we look at the technology across the board, you've got email archiving, you've got trading, you've got all kinds of different solutions out there. So anyway, I'm going to hopefully advance my slide here. There we go. Second here. There. So Ryan, thank you for the wonderful introduction. We came across essentially three main benefits for our own product. Two of these I think apply to all software technology in the financial services space, and those specifically are enabling compliance and legal teams to sleep better at night. If what you're putting in place is creating more questions or not solving a problem or not helping satisfy the compliance requirements, you probably shouldn't be using it. So you really want to get that feeling and knowledge that you're solving for a problem, allowing your teams to focus on things that are perhaps higher priority. It also ought to reduce costs. And when you look at putting a solution in place, if it costs way more than the benefit's worth, you probably shouldn't do it. So you'd really definitely need to be doing some business analysis. We get into discussions frequently with our clients or potential clients, and one of the things that comes up is the automation across systems, not just automation within our system, but automation through the integration of other systems. And a simple cost benefit analysis sometimes is really worthwhile. It's like, well, how big a problem is it currently? How many of these are you doing? What amount of time will you save? And then on the other side of the equation, what's it going to cost to implement that? And how big a distraction is it going to be as you're trying to scope out and build that integration? And sometimes it doesn't make sense. Sometimes it makes wonderful sense. So anyway, but you definitely ought to look at reducing costs through technology. So often compliance technology requisitions are viewed as a cost to the business. We can't spend money. We're already spending too much money on compliance, we've sometimes heard. And the reality of it is technology should be an enabler. It should reduce your overall cost. And in our specific case, we also help marketing teams get faster approvals. And this has been kind of an evolution for us. We originally sold our product based on risk and risk reduction, and more recently discovered that really it's marketing teams putting pressure on compliance that things are taking too long. So as a compliance team, you really need to be able to do more faster, with less time in your there. So Reuters did a study. Excuse me for a second here, but they did a study. It's the Reuters Cost of Compliance Report 2020, and they looked at kind of what's coming up here in the next 10 years, and they really saw that regulatory change was going to continue, that there's going to be more burden on compliance teams, on financial firms to satisfy more and more regulation. They didn't see it all of a sudden going away, and that technology is going to play a very big role in that. Now, if you look at this from a compliance professional perspective, or an owner of a business or leadership team, in that if they're going to enhance their abilities and their role within the organization, then they need to figure out how to better engage technology in many cases, on the day-to-day operations as well as overall. They need to be able to focus on what matters. A lot of what we see is busy work, frankly. When we go into a firm and we look at what the firm's doing, some of them, have done a really good job. Some of them have still struggled. Specifically, you'd be surprised at how many of the top 400 asset managers in the world we find are still using spreadsheets to manage some pretty important processes. Not all of them. Many of them have built-in systems that they built in-house. They're all under pressure to get stuff to market faster. They all have audits. They struggle to pull stuff together for audits. Just as an example, we have a client in Michigan. The CCO's named Sharon. She called me and she said, "Hey, I just called to say thanks. Prior to putting your software in, we had spreadsheets and we had a shared network drive, and the auditors asked for stuff, and it took my entire team almost 3 weeks to go through, only to discover we hadn't followed our naming conventions consistently." And we're still seeing that. We're seeing spreadsheets being used all over the place. And I'm not here to say spreadsheets are bad. They're actually very good. You can do some excellent reportings with spreadsheets. You can track things and so on, but there's some innate difficulty with them as well. They if I jump down to, let me go back here. If I jump down to point 6 here, you really want to make sure your data is safe. If an employee leaves and your spreadsheets go missing and you find out they're not in your backups for whatever reason because the folder they were being kept in isn't backed up, there's a problem. There's also potential security issues if they're being shared around and so on. So lots of issues. We're finding a lot of communication is just checking up on stuff. It's like, being in maybe a retail store before you had inventory control that you relied on, and someone call and say, "Hey, have you got any widgets?" And you'd have somebody run over to the shelf to check to see if you had any widgets because you didn't trust your system. So kind of same deal here when we look at what compliance teams are using. Unfortunately, I don't think there's a unicorn out there, though. So when we get into the specific solutions, I think you're still going to be forced with looking at point solutions for various things. And we could have a whole discussion on the balance between that. But leveraging technology, we're really talking about automating repetitive tasks so that you don't have to have people doing them all the time, gaining synergies across these teams, so that in our example, the marketing, compliance, risk folks, internal audit, and so on are all coordinating. Oftentimes, in the marketing world, the marketing review world, the pieces are sponsored by somebody in the business, a product manager, new product launch, and so on, or a new market you're going after, a new campaign, and so on. But those folks are all stakeholders in our solution because they also want the material to be approved quickly, approved with less effort, and so on. And as a business owner, they want to do it with less money. They don't want to be spending more and more money on just hiring more and more compliance people. And kind of lastly on the list is human error. If you can automate things and you have confidence in that automation, not only do you save the time, but you also reduce the risk for human error. And just kind of as a specific example, there's a very little example, but it's kind of a mindset. In our software, expiration date is a big deal. It's generally viewed as the date of last use or the date it last could have been used, which triggers your books and records retention period. It also is important from a reminder standpoint that you don't want stale material in production. You want to get that pulled down and refreshed if information on it needs to be refreshed. Well, one of the things that we heard from our clients was overriding the default expiration date was a little bit tedious. They had to click on the fact that they wanted to override it, and then they had to pop up calendar, and then they had to pick the date from the pop-up calendar and hit save, and it was good. I mean, not terribly tedious, but a little tedious. And the next thing we heard from our clients after we implemented that was, can you put some rules around this? Because we're finding some of our people are picking dates that are inappropriate. They're getting the wrong year, they're picking dates in the past, and so on. So we built the ability to kind of time box it, put rules around it. So it's all sounding pretty good here. We're reducing human error. We're having the system automatically handle these expiration dates and send out notifications and so on. So a lot of good automation. But there was still a risk to the firm that they were not doing it properly or picking the right date and that. So we went back to our software guys and said, is there any way we can make this even more bulletproof? And the answer was, let's put a user-defined question on the form where the submitter or the compliance people or anybody involved that has permission can pick from a user-defined field, whether it's one-time use only or quarterly or annual or every 3 years or whatever the answers are for the firm, and then have that drive logic that then updates the expiration date, which is what we did. And it really reduced the risk to the firm of having wrong expiration dates in there, and it made it super simple and saved time for the people. So on an ongoing basis, you want your vendors, all of your vendors that you're using software from, to be thinking and working with their clients, folks like you, and taking your feedback on what are the problem areas and how can we tweak our software or make major improvements to our software to reduce the risk, improve the level of automation, improve the synergies across teams, and so on. So that was just one example. I am trying to advance the slide here. Let me click it again. Ryan, you didn't happen to take the keyboard away from me, did you? Nope, there it is. Let's try it again. Ryan, do I still have control of the control, because it's not advancing for me?
I'm back here. I apologize.
Oh, now it is. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So some of the benefits of leveraging technology, and this is just a hodgepodge of some ideas we threw out here. Obviously, increased efficiency. You should not spend more time managing the tool than the tool's giving back to you. We often get asked that question. It's a very legitimate question. It's like, if we put this software in, how many people are going to be needed, or what's the full-time equivalent of people that are going to be needed to manage the tool? If the tool's giving up maybe a little more accuracy, some efficiency, but you need a team of people around it that are managing it, the net gain may be negative. Our Chief Technology Officer, Rick Gratial, has an expression he's very fond of, and that hesitating to share it, but I think I'll share it anyway. The concept is suck, as he calls it. And he said, you push the suck around. He said, sometimes you think you're squishing suck, but it's just popping up in another hole elsewhere. And you really want to reduce suck. You don't want just to move the suck around necessarily. So the same thing's true with any of these technologies, and I've got some slides a little later on. I'll dig into this a little deeper, but you want to make sure that you're increasing your net efficiency overall, not just task-specific efficiency. You got to look at it holistically. The regulatory risk reduction is pretty obvious. The less back and forth across teams, the less communication needed outside of any system where you're checking up and following up with things also help. We're seeing that manifest itself in notifications and escalations and automation. Just as an example of some of the earlier systems, and we get asked this a lot in the sales process, is, can I produce a spreadsheet? And it's like, what do you want to produce the spreadsheet for? The answer is yes, but why do you want to produce the spreadsheet? And it's like, so I can get a list of all of the stuff that's stuck in the queues so we can follow up with it. And it's like, okay, well, that's one way to do it, but wouldn't you rather the system just send a reminder, you see it on the screen and be able to sort on it without having to, take your spreadsheet list and then email people individually to tell them that something's stuck, or follow up with the phone and so on. So there's just a lot of automation of that sort of stuff that you should expect. Another big thing is to focus on core competencies, and this speaks more to outsourcing as well as technology. You really want to focus on what your core competencies are as a business. What is your secret sauce? What is it helps your business be successful? And that's where you want the bulk of your efforts put. So if if it's attracting new clients, if it's working on portfolios and helping your clients make more money, or if it's growing your firm and attracting more advisors, or whatever it is, that should be where the bulk of your efforts are being put, at least of your key management team. If you're finding yourself building electric generators so you have power to power your office, you're probably not focusing on something critical. You should be outsourcing that. I'm being a little exaggerating there. So there's 10 things we recommend you should look for in a technology provider. There's probably more than that, but this is a good list. If you take this list and use it afterwards, I think you'll see a lot of this is relevant. So the first one is, what is their area of expertise? In this industry, in the financial services space, partly because we're regulated, but also because there's a lot of really good solutions out there. You want to focus on a vendor where their core competency or their expertise is doing what it is that you're trying to accomplish. Don't go with somebody that's just a generic provider of something. And of course, there's exceptions. You wouldn't go with an industry-specific word processor. You'd use Microsoft Word, but it's still important that they understand, can speak your language, can help you get the most out of whatever it is you're getting, because they have expertise in it. Another one is cloud solution. I feel strongly about this. I've been speaking on cloud technology and cloud solutions for 10 years now. We saw it coming. We saw it as an evolution of kind of co-location and data centers, where it just made sense to leverage instant scalability, the ability to have more capacity dialed up within seconds, as opposed to having to order computers and have them installed in your data center. And again, back to my point on your core expertise, very, very few firms in the financial services industry would put their hand up and say their core expertise is running a data center. Boy, we're good at that. That's our secret sauce, is we have a data center. Anyway, I've made my point there. It used to be risky, or there was a perception of risk around cloud solutions. Are they secure? They're on the internet after all. And get their SOC 2 report, do your due diligence, of course, but I would argue at this point they're every bit as secure as any on-prem solution that you've also got internet access through. Probably more so because they're patched more regularly. You got a community of folks feeding into it. You've got some really good tools and cloud providers like Amazon Web Services and so on. Another thing is, do they solicit and implement feedback for new releases, and what is their new release schedule? For a while there was a whole bunch of mergers and acquisitions going on in this industry. I suspect that'll continue. There's a lot of venture capital in here, and one of the things when a VC firm comes into a private company, they want to show growth, and one of the ways you get growth is you buy other products or other vendors, and they may not be putting a bunch of effort into those products. They may say, hey, we've now added this new thing to our portfolio. Sounds good. You've got a vendor relationship with us already. You should go ahead and use it. But on a go forward basis, are they going to be a good partner with you? Are they really committed to taking your feedback, implementing those suggestions, and putting out new releases that continue to evolve? And this needs to happen. It's not just optional. The regulatory environment and your business needs evolve over time, and the software needs to keep current, or else you'll find yourself stuck with the equivalent of an in-house custom solution that's 10 years old, that's no longer meeting your needs, and you're looking at replacement. So again, are they continually improving their system? Another one is, and this is a big deal too, is are they books and records compliant? In the financial services space, if you're going to use somebody for your electronic books and records and rely on them for those electronic books and records, you are really rolling the dice if you don't get a third-party attestation letter of undertaking, and I've got a little sample of one here from the vendor that is saying that they're satisfying the appropriate rules, and that's typically the Securities and Exchange Act 17A4, often referred to as SEC 17A4, or 204 2 for the investment advisor. And you'll want to keep this letter on file so that when the SEC comes in and audits you, you can produce that file or that letter if they ask for it. How big a deal is it? Probably not that big a deal, frankly, during an audit if they discover you're using electronic books and records that are not compliant with the rules, unless, of course, they're throwing the kitchen sink at you for other things, in which case it becomes a big deal. Also, if you've got a data loss of any sort or a data breach of any sort, and the solution is not books and records compliant, it becomes a lot bigger deal. So just typical of most things short of cheating your clients. You know, it's not a big deal until it's a big deal. But anyway, I want to put that up there. You should ask the vendor, if you're going to put a new piece of software in, ask them, are they 17A4 or 204-2 compliant, and will they give you that third-party letter of undertaking? And that's a legal document. It's obligating the vendor to certain things as far as your books and records go. And one of those, and I won't spend too much time on this, but the regulators have a right to go to the vendor to get information in the event that you're either unable to or unwilling to provide that information. So that's one of the reasons the regulators want your solution to be books and records compliant. So it's not just all about data loss. I've seen and talked to all kinds of people who'll say, oh, we're books and records compliant, we back up our data. Well, that's good, you won't lose it. You probably not have such a big deal, or you're testing your backups and so on. And then the specific flexibility of the software doesn't meet your business requirements. And, you know, a bunch of ways you can figure that out. Obviously demos, material from the vendor, but talk to references, ideally, you know, dig in, take a look, and then find out how configurable it is. Will it meet your business requirements? A couple other things here. The implementation process, what's it entail? There is a very big tendency in software, been around for years, that there's a statement of work written. That statement of work has certain conditions in it, and then you would sign off on that statement of work prior to the keys being turned over and you going live typically. What often happens, and I don't fault the vendors for this, is scope changes. So here's the ideal scope, here's what we're going to do, here's what it's going to cost, and then the scope changes partway through it, either through a lack of, well, for whatever reason it changes, and then everything's billable. So what you thought was going to be the cost of implementation often is higher, or can often be higher. And I'm not speaking broadly for all vendors, but just in general, it's something to look at. Make sure you understand the implementation process, what's the sign off, and what potential additional costs are you going to have. And that I've included in here the post-implementation expenses with that. What's the support model? Is it sufficient for what you think you're going to need? And again, I'm driving at costs here. They're all part of it. There's a tendency, I wish we could do like the printer model or the razor model, where you just give the software away and then you charge every time they need a new razor blade. There's a tendency for that. So just make sure you understand those razor blade costs in this case. Another one, and we're seeing more folks wisen up to this in the contracting stages, is what happens to your data when you leave? Will they store it for you for the minimal books and records period? What's the cost involved in doing that? If they won't store it to you, how do you get your data out of there? Is it all of the data that you're going to need to satisfy your books and records? And is there a cost associated with that? I'm surprised this day and age how many vendors have gone to market with software that have no way of getting the data out of them, at least efficiently, without, you know, kind of one record at a time. As a result, some of them have charged exorbitant fees to their clients when requested to get the data out of the system. It feels like extortion to the folks that are undergoing it. In some cases it may be, but in many cases it's the vendor just has not built in the utilities within their software to get the data out in an efficient manner without costing an arm and a leg for a custom project to extract data. Some of that is because of the data model morphing over time when the data is stored in there. I'm talking in general systems in general. If configuration options force data migrations in order to satisfy your business needs, they're probably creating problems for data extraction down the road. So just some stuff, and I'm happy to talk with anybody individually that is considering that and in that situation. So again, just a smattering, going back to our specific solution, but I think a lot of this also applies across the board, is, we're an industry leader in the advertising review space. We're quickly approaching 50% of the top 20 asset managers in the world, but we also have a ton of small clients. We've got a bunch of them that are like a two-person RIA down in Texas here with about 125 million in assets under management. Why did they go with us? They had a person leave, and with her went 2 weeks of logs that they'd been keeping in spreadsheets. They thought they were being backed up, but they couldn't find them on the backups, and it's an embarrassment during the exam when they couldn't reproduce that. So for them, the solution was simple: create some efficiencies, make sure things secure, let compliance sleep better at night, kind of was their big thing. On a firm that size, the efficiency gains aren't going to be that big, but you want to look at those. In bigger firms, we see really substantial efficiency gains. We sign one client, you all know who it is, but I won't mention their name. They went from 7 days average approval time for marketing material from the time it was seen by compliance to the time it was approved for you. So they had an average of 7 days, albeit on an old clunky system, and they're now at 0.6 days. So they're down to like just slightly more than half a day on average. They're doing it with 2 less people. They had a team of 12. 2 of them left through attrition reasons, and they never replaced them. Their volumes are higher. So technology can really improve your efficiencies. But in a small firm, you got to really look at that suck. Is the cost of implementing the system, are the efficiencies really there, and how much management time is going to be put on that? And the answer ought to be clear. If it's not clear, move on. There's probably some other more important things to do. Again, books and records compliance, a big deal in the financial services space. So a couple specific things here. We threw this slide in. I'm not going to spend much time on it. But cloud-based really allows you to focus on your core business. If everything else being equal, if you don't have hardware to install, you don't have patches and operating systems to manage, and servers and security and intrusion monitoring and all that stuff that comes with having something on-prem, cloud is a much better solution. One of the issues with cloud, though, is cloud's not a specific solution where you're modifying the code or the system specifically for your needs. So the vendor solution needs to be highly configurable within the financial services space, because not everybody's doing things exactly the same way. In our case, we have a lexicon that scans for potential issues. Again, this is just an illustration of some of the ways of using technology to improve efficiencies. If the system can automate finding potential issues in a piece, not unlike trade review software finding potential front-running issues or anything else. There's a lot of automation can come that would otherwise take an IT team or someone with spreadsheets a lot of time to find. So you can gain things there. We're also seeing, specifically at the trade shows prior to this COVID thing, a lot of artificial intelligence being touted on trade show backdrops and brochures and stuff, where it's like, oh yeah, use artificial intelligence for compliance and stuff. And we could have a whole session on that. FINRA's come out and said various things regarding artificial intelligence. One thing to be wary of with the regulators here is you need to be able to prove to the regulators how a decision was arrived at. And you can't simply point at the black box and say, hey, our AI figured it out. We don't know how it weighted all the factors that went into it, but we fed it some data and it figured it out. And that's not good enough. You have to be able to specifically say how it arrived at that. I also feel strongly that in most financial services firms, probably all of them individually, you don't have a large enough data set to be doing true AI and determining rules from data. In our case, we know the rules, So we can do predictive intelligence and then let the machine take that predictive intelligence and do many of the things you can do with AI that determines the rules from the data. You know the rules. You just need to apply it to the data and use that intelligently. So we've done a bunch of stuff on that. Again, big subject. We can talk about it. APIs are a big deal these days. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. But an API is an application programming interface. You want to be able to integrate systems together. You want to be able to do single sign-on. Nowadays, everybody needs to be at least two-factor authentication. Simply having a password and a login is not adequate from a security standpoint. One of the things this COVID has done is the hackers and phishers and everything have gone to town. It's incredible the increase in that nefarious activity. So you want to go single sign-on. I don't have it up here on the slides, but that's essentially you're authenticating through your corporate identity and then being automatically logged in. It's a better user experience, better security, and so on. One of the things our firm believes strongly in is that we're going to work closely with our clients, our new clients, and have minimal disruption to their schedules to implement our software. We're going to continue to invest in our software. We've been doing it for 10 years. We see at least another 10 years of continued investment in it. And that we're viewing this as a long-term partnership with all of our clients. We value their feedback. We're an agile shop. We continually put new releases out every week. They tweak something. They're non-disruptive, so that you don't have this big bang approach. That's something else to look for in a vendor in general. Is are they truly an agile shop, or are they still using the waterfall methodology for development? Just like with compliance and life in general, nobody wants to wait 6 months or 9 months for a new release to fix a bug that was discovered 5 months ago. I mean, you really need that stuff wiped out. Why deal with the same issues over and over and over again when you can put little incremental releases out that improve the value your clients get, decrease from a vendor standpoint, decrease the number of calls we get, and allow us to focus on our core competency, which is helping build better software, not simply dealing with people calling about the same bug we knew about for the last 5 months. So anyway, other than that, I don't feel strongly about that point. Some key takeaways, and then we'll open it up to questions and answers. The demands placed on compliance professionals are going to continue to grow. We're seeing that. Routers is seeing that. If any of you think otherwise, please contact me afterwards and share with me. Certainly the investment advisors, since the Dodd-Frank Act, the burden has become greater, the Reg BI that came out recently and so on, these demands are going to be there. The compliance teams, I think, are going to have to be more agile and cost-centric. Unfortunately, they're still viewed as a cost center by most firms, albeit a necessary cost center. We occasionally get a new RIA registrant reach out to our firm and say, hey, would you guys help us register? And we'll counsel them and say, have you done this before? Have you got a book of business? And sometimes the answer is no. I'm I'm an airline pilot, but I got extra time on my hands because there's less flights right now. And we're like, okay, have you got a business plan together? And it's like, yes, I'm going to work from home and I'm going to, manage money for people. And we're like, okay, well, what about the cost of compliance? What about the cost of marketing? How are you going to recruit folks in that? Compliance is a necessary cost line in the financial service space. We're in a regulated industry. You have to be there. But most firms want it to be as little as possible, and rightly so. So anyway, I don't think anybody disagree with that. It also needs to be competitive for your firm too. Compliance is an enabler, specifically firms that are having RFPs done on them beforehand, touting your compliance, that we're compliant. We have this technology in place, we have this team in place, we're outsourcing mock audits, blah, blah, blah. Whatever you can, it can become an enabler to getting sales. The consumer expects you to be compliant, not just the regulators. And then the demand for technology is going to continue to grow. We're going to continue to see evolution in the technologies, just as we saw on-prem go to co-locate to cloud and so on. We're going to continue to see that. And that anybody in compliance really needs to partner with the rest of the business and perhaps reach out to the vendor that they're looking at on why this is good for the firm overall, not just why compliance needs it, but why should the firm do something here. And at that, I will open it up to questions. Hey, Ryan. Are you on mute by chance?
Can you hear me now?
I can, yeah.
All right.
Awesome. Yay.
Thank you again for the presentation, Stephen. Yeah, let's go ahead and take some questions from the audience. Attendees, please type your questions into the Q&A box in the control panel if you haven't done so already. All right. So we have a question here for you. Can you talk about AI and how it fits in our industry?
Yeah, AI is coming. AI means a bunch of different things to different folks, and the computer scientists understand various forms of it. There's like genetic algorithms, for instance, where they solve problems quicker and easier than it might be otherwise. We're talking specific AI in general, not general AI. General AI is kind of like that holy grail, kind of like what Alexa or Siri is pretending to be. I mean, they are using specific AI behind the scenes, like voice recognition's become incredibly good at detecting voices. We see facial recognition and so on. The regulators, the SEC and FINRA, are really good at using AI right now to identify insider trading and other nefarious patterns of behavior. But on the individual basis, if your vendor's touting AI for something, it's like the car salesman telling you that, it's only got 2,000 miles on it, even though it was built in 1974 or something. You really want a healthy dose of skepticism on what does that mean? What is it doing? And more importantly, can you satisfy a regulatory inquiry that you understand what it did? Is it doing something that the regulators are going to want to know? And it can't just be like a black box. It told us that this is what we should do, so we did that. It's just not there yet. There is a lot of AI that can help with automation, but just be a little skeptical. It's an overused term right now, frankly, as far as marketing these solutions in general. Although I have seen recently some folks back off of that. Initially, it was like, oh, we got to have AI, put it up on our slide, we got to have it, and backed off. So
it's the term. I got another question for you. Thank you for that. What about integration with existing legacy platforms like broker dealers? What challenges do you see in this area?
I think that's actually the perfect spot for an internal IT team and internal dev teams to be focusing their efforts. The chances of you finding a holy grail out there that does one vendor, one piece of software just does everything you need. It's got a CRM, it's got advertising review, it's got email review and email archiving and trade stuff and all of that. You're just not going to find it. They don't exist, in my opinion. So there is a lot of opportunities, though, to integrate across things. And one of the real simple ways of integration initially is around your user credentials. So you have a list of users, you authenticate onto your corporate network or your corporate environment with a login and password and maybe two-factor authentication, and you're in control of your passwords and so on. Why duplicate that across every single vendor? Why have to worry about the vendor's password policy and does it match your policy? Which we see a lot in RFPs. It's like, can you restrict the password to XYZ? Can it have these special characters? Do you have to change it every 3 months and so on? And it's like, guys, you're asking the wrong question. The question is, can we use your password policy in our system? Not can we duplicate what you have? Can we actually use what you have? And then if you change it, it's changed. So I would recommend early step is use single sign-on with as many vendors as you can. It's gotten a lot easier to set up. It's gotten a lot less expensive. Get something like Okta or Ping Identity or something in place. Use Microsoft has some, Salesforce has some, and then have a seamless user experience across that. The apps will look different, they'll do different things in them, but if they click on an app, they ought to be logged in automatically. They shouldn't have to put in a separate login and separate password.
I hear that.
Yeah.
You know what that's like.
Hey, we struggle with that internally even. It's, there's some apps just don't do it.
No, you're absolutely right. You discuss how some firms still have very manual processes. What type of tasks do you see firms automating through your system?
Well, we do advertising review compliance, so that's the big thing with us. But one of the things that I experienced back when Kathy and I, who's a co-founder of mine, were working at a hybrid broker-dealer, was we'd built an advertising review software solution there. She'd come up with a couple $100,000 in budget. She requisitioned the internal software team to build it for her, which I led that team, and we delivered it. But within a couple of months of it going live, the business needs changed, and the software wasn't configurable. We built it specifically for what we'd been asked to build for it. It wasn't like, oh, and make it super flexible because this stuff could change. They didn't know at the time. We learned that later. But as a result, she had to track some additional information. So what did she use? IT couldn't get it done on time. She was out of budget. So she fired up a spreadsheet, and her team of 8 reviewers were now tracking this data point outside of the system on a spreadsheet. And over the years, that becomes really difficult. The regulators come in, 3 years from now, and they say, hey, we want to see something. And now you're scrambling to find spreadsheets where you augmented your system with. So it speaks to the flexibility of the system and the ability of the system to adapt to your needs. Because in the absence of that, you really are back in the spreadsheet world, even though you bought a solution to get out of the spreadsheet world.
Sure.
That makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I get it. One last question for you here, Stephen. Does your system offer integrations? And if so, what types of groups or firms?
Yeah, no, good question. The answer is yes. The integrations tend to be specific to each firm, but in general, we're seeing integrations with front-end creation tools. So Seismic is fairly big out there, Primo, Synthesis, Adobe, what's it called? Experience Manager, I think it is. All of those make sense to integrate into our system from a large firm perspective. There's some economies of scale, but also we're seeing integrations with Salesforce. So if you've got a Salesforce or Redtail or some other product that's being used as a CRM, and you've got a significant sales presence, oftentimes the salesperson wants to see the documents that were used within a client, the approved documents in their CRM. They don't want to have to necessarily go elsewhere to find them. They want them at their fingertips. So that we also get some integrations across into reporting systems. Some firms have enterprise reporting solutions, and they want this fed into a corporate dashboard. So,
very cool.
How are we doing on time? I think
we're
used it all,
perfect,
haven't I?
actually. Yeah, it looks like we covered all of our questions from the audience. Is there anything else that you'd like to share, Stephen, before we conclude the session today?
No, I gotta say though, it's been a pleasure working with you and Al, and you guys have been pros. So thank you. Hopefully everybody benefits from having these. Yeah. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Stephen. It's been a pleasure too, and thanks again. As I go through the slides here and I get this properly taken care of, there we go. Looks like we're on to our 10-minute intermission. It's our first one. We'll be back live at 11:10 with our second session, which will feature a lively panel discussion developing your firm's strategic operations vision. So please stay logged in.